It is a strange feature of the Christian life that its greatest triumphs often look to the world like little more than plodding. We are tempted to imagine that holiness is made in flashes of ecstasy, in sudden bursts of radiant vision, or in a once-for-all transformation that leaves us shining like saints in stained glass. Yet, more often than not, sanctification feels like the slow tread of boots on a narrow road, one step after another, through rain and dust, through long stretches of ordinary time. Indeed, the saints of God are not chiefly those who sprinted briefly and collapsed, but those who pressed on, quietly, faithfully, sometimes with weariness in their bones, yet always in the same direction. For sanctity is not a single leap, but a journey, not a momentary enthusiasm, but a long obedience. And it is precisely in that endurance that we are remade into the likeness of Christ. If you ask me to describe sanctification, I would not picture a mountain suddenly raised overnight, but rather the steady growth of an oak tree. A tree begins as an acorn, small, almost laughable in its insignificance, but within it lies a destiny of towering branches, of roots sunk deep into the earth, of strength that will one day withstand storms. Sanctification is just such growth. It is the slow expansion of Christ's life within us, pressing outward until every thought, desire, and action is drawn into His likeness. And yet, growth requires patience. We do not become holy by willpower alone, nor by occasional spasms of religious excitement. Instead, God chisels us by time, by trial, by repetition. Like a sculptor with marble, He works away at the stone of our lives, each blow shaping us, sometimes painfully, toward the image of His Son. To us, it may feel like endless delay, like a tedious process of small corrections. But heaven, I suspect, sees each stroke as progress toward glory. The difficulty is that we live in an age of impatience. We want instant results, quick conversions, immediate fruit. But God seems less interested in our speed than in our endurance. He does not merely wish to decorate us with virtues, as one might pin medals on a soldier's chest. He desires to make us virtuous, to infuse holiness into the marrow of our being. And this requires what one writer aptly called a long obedience in the same direction. Consider a pilgrim on a long road. At first, the excitement of the journey carries him swiftly forward. He looks with eagerness at the horizon, imagining the city of his destination. But as the miles wear on, his feet blister, the road lengthens, and the scenery grows monotonous. The thrill fades. Here is the true test. Will he continue, step by weary step, even when the joy of novelty has passed? Sanctification, I think, is proved in such moments. It is not the initial enthusiasm, but the stubborn endurance of faith that brings us to the gates of heaven. Of course, one might ask, why should God make it so long, so difficult? If He can forgive in an instant, why not also perfect in an instant? The answer, I think, lies in the nature of love. For sanctification is not simply the correction of faults, but the transformation of relationship. God is not content to leave us as mere pardoned criminals. He desires sons and daughters, friends and lovers, companions who have freely grown into His likeness. Instant perfection would be efficient, but it would not be love. Love is patient. It takes the long road because it wishes not only to arrive at the destination, but to walk with the beloved along the way. Thus, the road to sanctification is, in truth, a school of love. Each season teaches us something new. In times of abundance, we learn gratitude. In times of scarcity, dependence. In joy, we learn praise. In sorrow, trust. And each lesson, though seemingly small, is an exercise by which the muscles of the soul are strengthened. Like an athlete who trains daily for the race, we are being prepared for a glory that will, at last, be revealed when the finishing line is crossed. But let us not deceive ourselves. This path is not easy. The world will mock it as slow, outdated, or foolish. Temptations will whisper of shortcuts, promising joy without obedience, glory without the cross. And even our own hearts will betray us, groaning at the burden of perseverance. Yet the truth remains. Only by continuing in faith, only by fixing our gaze on the one who has gone before, can we hope to finish the race. Christ himself endured a long road, 30 years of hidden life, 3 years of ministry misunderstood, and a final walk to Golgotha. If sanctification is the process of becoming like him, can we expect our path to be shorter or smoother? And yet, take heart, for though the road is long, we are not asked to walk it alone. The Spirit walks within us, the Church walks beside us, and Christ himself waits ahead of us. Each step, however small, is honored. Each stumble, if confessed and surrendered, is forgiven. What matters is not the brilliance of each stride, but the constancy of direction. Think of it this way. A compass needle may tremble and waver, but as long as it returns always to the true north, the traveler will arrive at his destination. So it is with the soul in sanctification. Our hearts may falter, but if they are ever reoriented to Christ, we remain on the road that leads to glory. And perhaps one day, when we look back from heaven's perspective, we shall see that what seemed so slow and stumbling was, in fact, the very means by which God made us strong enough to bear his joy. If the Christian life is indeed a road, then sanctification is the wayfarer's discipline, the rhythm of rising each morning, shouldering one's pack, and setting one's face toward the unseen city. The grandeur of the destination may fade from our immediate sight, but the act of obedience remains. It is not unlike a marriage. At first, there is the fire of romance, the sweetness of discovery, the intoxicating sense of a new world opening, but in time the daily duties arrive, the washing of dishes, the keeping of promises, the 1,000 small kindnesses that must be chosen anew each day. And strangely enough, it is in those ordinary repetitions, those long obediences in the same direction, that love grows deeper, more enduring, more real. Sanctification, too, is less about the fireworks of ecstasy than about the steady burning of a hearth fire, which warms not only the heart, but all who gather around it. We must not despise the ordinary. God himself has chosen the ordinary as the stage upon which sanctity is played out. Bread and wine, water and oil, the human body itself, these are the simple materials through which grace flows. Why should it surprise us, then, that our journey into holiness is likewise made through daily obedience? The prayer said when one is tired, the forgiveness offered when one is wounded, the truth spoken when a lie would be easier. These things, unimpressive to the world, are in fact the very stepping stones that lead to heaven. The danger, of course, is that we lose heart. When progress seems invisible, we are tempted to abandon the road. We imagine that our failures disqualify us, that our sins have rendered the journey pointless. But here is the mercy of God. Sanctification is not measured by speed, but by direction. The child who stumbles yet rises again is more truly advancing than the one who refuses to walk at all. Holiness is not the absence of failure, but the persistence of trust. The saints are not those who never fell, but those who fell and rose, again and again, until they were upheld finally by grace. Let us remember, too, that sanctification is not solitary. We walk this long road together. The Church, for all its faults, is the pilgrim community, the caravan of saints and sinners alike, traveling toward the same goal. It is easier to endure monotony, hardship, and delay when one is not alone. Songs are sung more heartily when joined in chorus. Burdens are borne more lightly when shared. And though the fellowship may sometimes try our patience, it is precisely in such company that we are trained in love. How could one learn patience, forgiveness, or humility in isolation? There is another comfort as well. Christ himself has gone before us. He is not only the destination, but also the pattern of the journey. Every act of obedience, however small, is a participation in his obedience to the Father. Every act of self-denial is a shadow of his cross. And every step of perseverance, however faltering, is a reflection of his endurance. When we stumble, he is there. When we faint, he carries us. When we despair, his wounds remind us that the road to resurrection always passes through the valley of death. The poet once spoke of the soul being surprised by joy. And I think that is how sanctification often feels in the end. We walk the road, often weary, often blind to our own progress. But suddenly, in a moment of grace, we glimpse how far we have come. The vices that once bound us no longer enslave. The virtues that once seemed impossible have become almost natural. The likeness of Christ, once faint, shines more clearly upon the face, and the weary traveler discovers that the long obedience, which seemed so dull and endless, has in fact prepared him for joy too great to be borne. We must not lose sight of the promise. He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. The road is long, but it is sure. The obedience is hard, but it is fruitful. And the same God who calls us forward will, at last, bring us home. If sanctification is the long obedience, then hope is the lantern by which we see our way. No traveler can walk for days and years upon a weary road unless he holds in mind the vision of his destination. Imagine a man trudging through storm and darkness with no idea of what lies ahead. His heart would soon break, and his steps falter. But if he knows that beyond the hills lies his Father's house, warm with fire and alive with welcome, he can endure almost anything. So too with us. Sanctification is possible only because heaven is real. The faint music we hear from beyond the hills, the strange homesickness that stirs within us, is not illusion. It is the call of our true country, and it is this call that enables us to press forward even when the road is long. And here lies a paradox most glorious. The more we obey, the freer we become. The world imagines that obedience is a kind of slavery, a chain that binds and narrows the soul. But in truth, obedience is the only path to liberty. A train is free only when it runs upon its tracks. A fish is free only when it swims within the water. And man is free only when his will moves in harmony with the will of God. Sin is the rebellion that promises freedom but delivers bondage. Sanctification is the alignment of our nature with God's, until at last we find that obedience is not burden but joy, not restraint but song. This long obedience also teaches us humility, for if we expected holiness to be instant, we might grow proud of ourselves. But when progress is slow, when victories are mingled with defeats, we are kept low to the ground, leaning on grace. We begin to see that sanctification is not our achievement but God's. The gardener may water and weed, but it is the sun and rain that cause the tree to grow. So too in our lives. We labor, but it is the Spirit who sanctifies. We obey, but it is God who transforms. We walk, but it is Christ who carries us. Let us not mistake, however, sanctification is not passive. God does not drag us to holiness against our will. We must choose, day by day, to walk the road, to say yes to grace, to rise again after every fall. The Spirit works within us, but He does not bypass us. Holiness is not merely infused, it is cultivated, as a child learns to walk by taking wobbly steps, falling often, but always rising again, with his Father's hand stretched out to steady him. I believe that one of the greatest surprises of heaven will be to discover how much was accomplished in us by what seemed the smallest acts. The prayer whispered when no one saw. The temptation resisted in silence. The kindness offered without applause. These things, trivial to human eyes, are great victories in God's sight, for it is through such small obediences, multiplied over time, that saints are formed. And so, sanctification is a mystery woven of both time and eternity. Each step is temporal, small, and fleeting. Yet the pattern being woven by God is eternal, vast, and glorious. We see only the threads. He sees the tapestry. And one day, when we stand in His presence, we shall see what He has been making of us all along. There is a phrase I once heard, the sanctification of the ordinary. At first it seemed odd, even disappointing, for we expect the holy to be wrapped in fire, thunder, or visions. But I have come to see that nothing could be more fitting. If Christ Himself came to us not in royal splendor, but in a carpenter's home, not in Caesar's palace, but in a manger, should we be surprised that He chooses the lowly things of life as the instruments of our sanctification? It is in the patient raising of children, the honesty of one's labor, the endurance of illness, the forgiving of an insult, and the quiet prayer at night that holiness grows. These things rarely make headlines. They rarely even impress our neighbors. Yet, they are the soil in which God sows eternal seed. And though the road of sanctification may appear dull to those who seek constant novelty, it is in this very monotony that souls are refined for glory. Think of music. It is not the single note, but the repetition and discipline of scales that trains the musician. Or think of the soldier. It is not the rare moment of battle, but the daily drill that prepares him for victory. Sanctification works much the same way. It is the accumulation of obediences, the compounding of prayers, the layering of countless small acts of faithfulness until the soul, almost without realizing it, has been tuned to sing the song of heaven. But we must be clear about the stakes. The road to sanctification is not merely about becoming a better version of ourselves. It is about becoming something entirely new. Christianity does not claim to make us merely moral, respectable, or decent. It dares to claim that God intends to make us holy as He is holy, to set our hearts ablaze with His own life, to fit us for eternal communion with Him. If that sounds frightening, it is because sanctification is indeed a great and terrible thing. To be conformed to Christ is to surrender everything that is not Christ. The old self must die if the new self is to live. Here is why obedience must be long and steady. We could not bear the whole transformation at once. God, in mercy, works gradually, peeling away layers, strengthening the soul to endure more light, until at last the full weight of glory does not crush but crown us. This is why the road is long, not because God is slow, but because His work is so profound that it takes a lifetime to complete. And yet, even now, we are given foretastes. In worship, in prayer, in the sudden gleam of grace that breaks through an ordinary moment, we are reminded that sanctification is not mere drudgery, but a pilgrimage toward joy. The same road that feels weary beneath our feet is leading us home. Every step brings us closer to the city, whose builder and maker is God. There is, I think, a deep comfort in realizing that sanctification is not merely about our striving, but about God's faithfulness. The command to a long obedience might sound crushing if we imagined it depended solely on our endurance. Who among us has not grown weary? Who has not stumbled, wandered, or even sat down in despair upon the roadside? But sanctification is not chiefly the tale of man clinging desperately to God. It is the story of God refusing to let go of man. The shepherd does not abandon his sheep, even when they stray into thickets or tumble down ravines. He seeks, He rescues, He restores. And so it is with us. Our sanctification is sustained not by our grip on Him, but by His grasp upon us. Still, He calls us to walk. He will not carry us as corpses. He insists that we live. The grace that saves us is also the grace that trains us. A child carried everywhere in his father's arms may be safe, but he will never learn to walk. And so God, in sanctification, sets us down and bids us take steps. They are clumsy at first, and we fall often. Yet each fall becomes a lesson, each step a victory, until strength grows beneath weakness. The long obedience is thus not a punishment, but a gift, the process by which we become truly alive. We must also remember that sanctification is communal. One of the devil's oldest tricks is to convince us that holiness is a solitary achievement. But no one becomes holy alone, just as no coal can burn apart from the fire. The body of Christ exists not merely as a gathering of like-minded individuals, but as the furnace in which sanctity is kindled and preserved. The rebukes of a brother, the encouragement of a sister, the sacraments administered in the fellowship of believers, all these are instruments in the slow shaping of the soul. It is a humbling thought. My sanctification depends upon yours, and yours upon mine. God weaves us together in the great tapestry of His church, so that none may boast, and all may belong. And what of suffering? For surely the long road winds through valleys as well as meadows. Many have stumbled here, imagining that pain disproves the love of God. But if we think honestly, we shall see the opposite is true. No athlete is trained without strain. No metal is purified without fire. Suffering, unwelcome though it be, is one of the chief tools by which God chisels our souls. It strips away illusions, deepens our dependence, and enlarges our capacity for compassion. Sanctification without suffering would be like spring without rain, pleasant perhaps, but fruitless. And yet even suffering is not the last word. Joy, too, belongs to the long obedience. There are moments when heaven's light pierces through the clouds, when laughter and love spill over, when one tastes the sweetness of God as surely as one tastes bread. These are foretastes of the banquet to come, tokens along the way that remind us the road, though long, leads to celebration. Sanctification is not the grim march of the condemned, but the hopeful pilgrimage of the redeemed, pressing on toward a feast prepared from before the foundations of the world. We must, then, keep our eyes fixed on Christ. He is not only the pattern, but the prize, not only the way, but the end of the way. To be sanctified is simply to be conformed to Him, to think as He thinks, to love as He loves, to will as He wills, until at last we are able to say with the Apostle, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." And so the road stretches on, long, demanding, yet radiant with promise. Each step may feel small, but each step is a thread in the weaving of eternal glory. The obedience may be slow, but it is steady, and it leads unfailingly to the heart of God. There is a secret hidden in sanctification, which, once glimpsed, changes everything. The road itself is already part of heaven. Too often we imagine holiness as a destination we shall reach only after the grave, as if all our life were but a waiting room for glory. But no, eternity has already begun in the soul that yields itself to Christ. The Spirit dwelling within is the first note of the symphony that shall resound forever. Every act of obedience is already a participation in eternal life. Every surrender of self is already a foretaste of joy divine. Think of it like dawn. When the sun first rises, the world is still dim, the shadows still long, and yet that faint light is already the same sun that will blaze at noon. Sanctification is the dawn of heaven within us. We stumble in half-light, yes, but the same fire that shall one day clothe us in unapproachable brightness has already touched our souls. This long obedience is not simply the means of reaching heaven, it is heaven breaking into us. Now, to the watching world, such talk seems folly. They look at the Christian plodding along, confessing sins, restraining appetites, bearing wrongs, persisting in prayer, and they see only burden. But the secret known to the saints is that this burden is strangely light. To walk in obedience is to shed the far heavier weight of pride, lust, envy, and despair. The yoke of Christ, though it demands everything, grants rest to the soul. The road may be narrow, but it leads out of the choking labyrinth of self and into the wide fields of God's freedom. And here we touch the mystery of joy. Joy, in its deepest sense, is not the reward for sanctification. It is its companion along the way. It breaks in unexpectedly, like wildflowers blooming at the edge of a hard road. One may be bowed with grief, weary with struggle, yet suddenly discover one's heart lifted by a grace that cannot be explained. This is the laughter of heaven spilling over into time, the smile of God breaking through the clouds. It does not cancel pain, but it transfigures it. Such joy is a compass for the pilgrim, reminding him that every step is meaningful, every obedience precious, every sorrow temporary. Yet let us not imagine the road goes on forever. There is an end, and it is glorious. The long obedience in the same direction does not circle aimlessly like a treadmill. It presses steadily toward a true horizon. Beyond the final hill lies the city of God, where every obedience, however faltering, will be gathered up into perfect praise. There, the stumbling steps of our sanctification will be revealed as the dance of eternity. The small obediences of earth will be crowned with the great "well done" of heaven. And then the long road will be no more. For the pilgrim shall at last arrive, the child shall at last be grown, the bride shall at last be ready for the bridegroom. What began as the weary trudge of discipline shall end in the music of glory. And so, my friends, we find ourselves at the close of this long meditation. And yet in truth we are not at the end but at the threshold. For the road to sanctification is not a subject to be finished, as one might close the cover of a book, but a pilgrimage to be lived, one footstep at a time, until life itself gives way to eternity. If I could leave you with one image, it would be this: sanctification is the shaping of the soul for the music of heaven. Imagine a great orchestra tuning its instruments before a performance. The sounds are discordant, uneven, almost painful to the ear. Yet each note, however jarring, is a necessary preparation for the harmony to come. So too, our lives in Christ. Our stumblings, our repentances, our small obediences are like the tuning of strings. We may not hear the beauty now, but God is preparing us for a symphony in which every life will join, each part blending into a music that shall resound forever in His presence. The long obedience is not glamorous, but it is glorious. For glory is not reserved for the mighty or the quick, but for those who persevere. The race is not won by the sprinter, who exhausts himself in a single burst, but by the runner who endures to the end. Likewise, the crown of sanctification is not given to those who dazzled briefly, but to those who, in quietness and humility, pressed on in faith. And remember, we are not left to walk this road unaided. Christ Himself is both the companion and the destination. The Spirit dwells within us as strength and comfort. The Father waits at the end with open arms. Even our failures, when confessed, become stepping stones, for God in His mercy weaves even our weaknesses into the fabric of our sanctity. The road is long, but it is not lonely. It is demanding, but it is not hopeless. Perhaps you feel weary as you listen, conscious of how far you have yet to go. Take heart. The very awareness of your need is already a sign of grace at work in you. God is not ashamed of your small steps. He delights in them, as a parent delights in the first stumbling steps of a child. What matters is not perfection achieved in an instant, but direction maintained through a lifetime. And if we keep our eyes fixed upon Christ, if we continue in obedience, even faltering, even limping, we shall find that He has carried us further than we ever dreamed. One day the road will end, and what seemed long will appear but a moment. We shall see that every act of obedience, every sacrifice, every tear shed along the way was not wasted, but gathered up into the eternal joy of God. Then we shall rest, not in weariness, but in glory, and discover that the journey was itself part of the destination all along. So let us walk on, steadily, patiently, joyfully, with our eyes set upon the city whose light never fades. For the one who calls us is faithful, and He will surely bring us home. If these reflections have stirred something in you, I invite you to continue the journey with us. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, so that together we may walk the road of faith, encouraging one another, until the long obedience finds its glorious end in the presence of God.